mind that much. But after 20 years of such an arrangement, it began having an impact on our natural resources, because they are guzzling gas resources like nobody's business. To the point that currently there's a huge gas curtailment in Malaysia. And it was arranged in such a way that whether or not they are running, no matter how much they are supplying electricity to the grid, they would still be paid about that 2 billion ringgit every year because of this thing called capacity charges. So these are the kind of things that the 2 billion ringgit that is earned unfairly by the concessionaires every year, of course, are passed to TNB, and TNB would actually have to adjust the rate accordingly to be able to stay afloat in order to feed the IPPs. And when your biggest utility, electricity, has this kind of unfair terms that basically channels all the profits to 4 or 5 of the largest corporations in the country, of course you will end up every single thing down the line, from the manufacturing to the retail, having to bear the kind of cost increase we've seen in the last 10 years. So people I think understand by now, because Datuk Seri Anwar first brought the issue of IPP in 2008 in the public debate. I think people understand the unfairness of it all. What people want to know is, how could you do it? And it's very simple, because number one, a lot of these IPP producers, they are not 100% or solely owned by these tycoons, except for Genting. Genting has been taken private. But a lot of others, YTL, Markov, and the others, are also owned by the JLCs, either by APF or by Khazanah or by Pemodalan Nasional Berhad. So one way or another, whether it's IPP, whether it's toll concessions, whether or it's MAS, anything in Malaysia, a substantial holding is held by government agencies. So it's a question of political will, because the power in the boardroom, more often than not, rests with the government of the day. So that's why when we first unveiled our buku jingga, we say that we could get rid of toll within 100 days. People say it's impossible. But we based the whole proposition on the basis that even at that time, that was November 2010, I think, even at that time, Khazanah and EPF at that time were in the process of taking over the whole minority shareholding in Plus, making Plus now more or less wholly owned by the government. So when it's a question of right hand going to left hand. It's a question of political will, it's a question of how much you want to spread the cost in the case of some new concessions. But in the case of all concessions, the first 5 concessions for IPPs, the Plus, a lot of the highways, the costs have been fully recovered. Why do we still keep paying profits after profits at the expense of the public to these people, so that they can become the top 10 richest men in Southeast Asia? So if the very basis of the agreement in the mid-90s is to ensure that they recoup their investments, they have recouped their investments. So what happens next is whether or not the government of the day, which holds most of the substantial shareholding in all these corporations, want to plow back the money back to the people, and it's just left hand to right hand. So I think a lot of the things in Malaysia is not a question whether it can be done or it cannot be done. It's a question of whether you want to do it or not. Selangor, for example, my last sentence, Selangor, for example, when we took over, was sliding into deficit. Every year, people, K-Toyo was spending a lot, mostly on Disney tours, I think. It was sliding into deficit, but within 3 years, the reserve was tripled from about 400 million to 1.2 billion. And there was no magic done. It's a question of making sure that you have the financial discipline to give most to the people. And okay, I hate to use the word regulate, because it sends a different signal. When I say regulate, I mean to make sure that even private entities operating in Malaysia operate within a fair band of profitability. And you can do this in many ways. Either you renegotiate the agreements, or whether you introduce windfall tax. And that has been done all over the world.
I just want to add 2 points before we go for our next round of Q&A, if it's okay. Yeah? The first one is with regards to the IPPs, because I think many people, when you start comparing to what we pay for electricity below 500 kilowatt, you compare us to Thailand, where gas is sold at the prevailing market price. They pay cheaper for electricity below 500 kilowatt than Malaysia. So below 500 kilowatt, who uses it? Of course, normal consumers, not industry users. So I think this is an important issue, because this information must be highlighted. If you have subsidies, why are you paying more for electricity? It's just unacceptable. That's why it gives a lot of moral justification for the takeover. I don't think, honestly, any political party, with some sort of conscience would have to take on and proceed with this initiative. With regards to Plus, because I remember the last dialogue I had, it was just quite brutal with YB Khairi Jamaluddin. Did not miss that. I think the most important issue is when you talk about Plus, and they keep saying, we don't know how to manage it. The North-South project Lebuh Utara Selatan. We don't know how to manage it. We have no experience. Let me remind you, 1986, when Plus was announced, the project was announced. Basically, Tun Mahathir on record stated, we need to award Plus to finance UMNO's coffers, to finance UMNO's building at the time. So can you imagine such a blatant display? In India, you would have people fighting tooth and nail to ensure sort of the first highway project they awarded in the benefit for the interest of the people. But no such thing for UMNO. And finally, in Sami Value's response to defend why the particular company was awarded the project, he says, don't worry, Hati Budi, who was the majority shareholder in UEM Engineering, Hati Budi belongs to UMNO, so we don't have to worry. Therefore, awarding them the project is in the best interest of the nation. So I want to add that on, because people keep forgetting this. I think it's important to put it in context, and it's also important to have a plan in action if you were given a chance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, I think, yes.